Welcome back to College Football Addiction. We have on with us Tom Hannifan, our Penn State expert from State of State and Believe in Big Ten. Tom, how's it going, bud?
Doing well. If you'd have told me that Penn State was going to grab the best defensive coordinator in college football in this cycle, and they would have poached him not only from the national champions, but from Ohio State, I thought you were on something. So life's pretty good right now in Happy Valley.
Yeah, it is happy, right? No pun intended. So that was way too easy for a dad of three to make that joke. But when we talked about Tom Allen leaving, backing it up just a little bit, I think the thoughts were like, maybe they go internal, maybe they go this guy, maybe, but like, it probably won't rock the boat so much. Like this one rocked the boat. Like if I'd have told you they were going to upgrade over Tom Allen, with all due respect to him, which I'm a huge Tom Allen fan, both personally and professionally. We've talked about like from Tampa, so I probably like him more than the average person. So I'm a Tom Allen homer, but if I'd have told you they're going to upgrade over Tom Allen, like you'd probably said like, are they really though? Like, is that really like, are you sure they're going to upgrade over Tom Allen?
Mm-hmm.
And again, all due respect to him, before we even get into Jim Knowles, just the idea of, oh no, we actually did just get better here, right? Like that's pretty insane.
Yeah, there just really weren't a whole lot of defensive coordinators that were, one, available, and two, better than Tom Allen. So it was genuinely a surprise to me. There were plenty within the Penn State media circles that were like, oh, Jim Knowles should be the number one candidate. And it was like, yeah, and we should get Andy Reid to be our offensive coordinator. And I'd love to have dinner with Salma Hayek, but it's not happening, is it, guys? And slowly but surely, the process got underway, and there were some names. Ephraim Bando was thrown out there as somebody that had some ties with Tom Allen in the past, and discussions about Elijah Robinson at Texas A&M, Penn State Letterman, Danton Lynn. A conversation was had there, and ultimately USC paid up to keep Danton Lynn. He's done a good job at USC and even before that. So it all kind of settled down, and then there was a conversation of, well, do they promote from within? Anthony Poindexter, who's the co-defensive coordinator and the safeties coach, had been up for the head coaching job at his alma mater of Virginia years past. So it just kind of felt like, what's going on here? And then somewhere along the line, Penn State and James Franklin and Pat Kraft, the Penn State athletic director, he has prided himself on being aggressive and has prided himself on his time at Penn State and making sure that every sport is competing for championships. And this is putting your money where your mouth is, putting $3.1 million on average over a 3-year deal in front of Jim Knowles is not only crazy from a college football standpoint in terms of paying a coordinator that much. There's only 3 NFL defensive coordinators making more than he is right now, which is insane. It's crazy from that standpoint. It's crazy by Penn State standards. Penn State is notoriously tight-fisted when it comes to spending on sports. You make such a killing on football that you don't necessarily have to go into the marketplace and do more than just say, we're Penn State, you should want to come be here. The NIL and transfer portal advent changed everything, and Penn State paid up for Tom Allen. They paid up for Andy Kotelnicki. So to put this big of a chunk of money down on the table for Jim Knowles, one, it's warranted based on the ability of the person, and two, it signals to everybody else that Penn State is not messing around in 2025. My hope is it's an indicator that Penn State is prepared to spend like that for years to come and not just all in on one season.
Yeah. What's also interesting to me, and we'll dive more into Knowles here in a minute, is everyone kind of thought that with resources having to be allocated toward NIL and the ever-changing or ever eager race that is facilities and just everything else, this house settlement, spending money there, people thought that coaching salaries would kind of be the first thing to start to get cut. Like, hey, we're lessening some of your load in recruiting to an extent, because we're paying players to come here, all over the country, not just Penn State. So you're not going to make as much money. Like we're giving you a $20 million salary cap. So I don't want to say don't have to work as hard, but we have resources to make your life maybe a little easier from a recruiting perspective. You're not going to make as much in coaching. And again, not a Penn State thing, like a college football wide thing, like salaries are going to come down. This maybe flies in the face of that. Like you're going to pay up if you want elite coaches. And, so maybe a microcosm of what we'll see in college football going forward. Maybe these salaries aren't coming down for coaches.
I don't think they are. I think the interesting thing that we've seen over the last few years, there was an exodus last offseason of coaches leaving college football and going to the NFL because they didn't want to deal with the headaches of the transfer portal and NIL because there just really aren't that many steadfast rules. And if you go to the NFL ranks, you don't have to recruit these guys. You just have to produce, which is a whole other level of pressure. So when you naturally sign up to coach at the college level right now, it's how much of this BS do you want to deal with? And that's why you saw guys like Chip Kelly's a perfect example, was a head coach at UCLA and was like, I'll just go be a coordinator under a guy I've known forever in Ryan Day, work with arguably the best offensive personnel in college football at the time. And he doesn't have to do as much in recruiting. His name does a lot in and of itself. And what little he has to do in that department, it's enough, but it's not going to make you, question your existence and drive you into the ground, that sort of thing. So I feel like it's changed so much in that coordinators have this kind of safe haven from all the BS. And it's the head coaches, the CEOs. James Franklin is a perfect example. Ryan Day obviously just won himself a national championship. Dabo Sweeney is a guy who's proven he's a great CEO of a franchise. So I think it's only going to go up from here. But the thing that I talk with Justin King about all the time on State of State, and he believes in this thoroughly, it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. So for Penn State, you're more than covered when it comes to the X's and O's. Now you've got to do some work when it comes to the Jimmies and Joes.
So let's talk about that. Jim Knowles specifically. Talk to me about the recruiting aspect, and we'll talk about what the adjustments maybe are from a team perspective, from a coaching perspective. But just talk to me a little bit about that. Not that recruiting on the defensive side of the ball has been bad. I just saw Abdul Carter now has the second best odds in the NFL draft at this moment. And so as he continues to rise up a little bit in that draft board, could he pass both quarterbacks? We'll see. Not that recruiting has been a problem at Penn State by any means, but talk to me about that. Jim Knowles, the recruiter.
I think Jim Knowles' ties to Philadelphia certainly help. He's been just about everywhere over the last few decades, and especially recently being at Ohio State and being at Oklahoma State. Just experience at every level that you could possibly ask for. And I think his name, his reputation does a lot of heavy lifting. Penn State loves getting Pennsylvania guys. And he spoke earlier on this week when he was formally introduced to the team that he grew up in Philadelphia and he grew up seeing Penn State football on TV. And that was always the mecca. That was always the dream. So I think to have Andy Kotelnicki, who's one of the hottest offensive coordinator names in the country right now, Jim Knowles, who's maybe the most respected and talented defensive coordinator in the country right now, that's going to do a lot of heavy lifting for you in terms of Jim Knowles being able to pound the pavement and go and get guys. Remains to be seen, and it remains to be seen how long he's with Penn State. These contracts, the years kind of don't mean anything at times. So see what effect he's able to have on Penn State football long term. In the short term, in 2025, is it going to result in Penn State grabbing some guys out of the portal that they probably did not grab in the past or were not willing to pay for in the past? I think that's going to be the interesting thing because there are gaps within this defense. If you mentioned Abdul Carter off to the NFL, Kobe King, starting middle linebacker to the NFL, Jalen Reed, KJ Winston, who was injured earlier on the season, two great safeties off to the NFL, Jalen Kimber, starting corner off to the NFL, two defensive tackles out of eligibility and off to the NFL. So there's going to be some questions to be answered in this offseason, whether it's done internally with the existing roster and incoming class of 2025 remains to be seen. But are you able to take advantage of this upcoming transfer portal window and grab some guys that historically you would not have been able to get their attention now because you have Jim Knowles?
When it comes to coaching, when it comes to on the field play, what does Jim Knowles do that excites you that is maybe different than Tom Allen? Like, what are the characteristics of a Jim Knowles defense that you're maybe most looking forward to seeing?
I really liked how Jim Knowles was able, especially in the playoff run, to just create havoc along the offensive line and that there's always, great protection beats great coverage. Well, confusion with pass protection can also lead to pressures and sacks and just overall disarray when it comes to an offense. I think Ohio State was fortunate that it ran up against some offensive lines there in the college football playoff that they kind of mess with, Tennessee and especially Texas. But yeah, I think he does a really good job of mixing up his alignments and drawing the responsibilities of the offensive line into different scenarios that they're following their responsibilities. They're following their instructions in terms of pass protection. But just by the way that he sets up alignments or sends blitzes, those sorts of things, he just creates confusion. So I think that's going to be a real positive. And it's interesting because Manny Diaz was blitz heavy, going for turnovers, okay with giving up the big play and explosives, few more of those, but would get turnovers at a higher clip. Tom Allen was about suffocating you in the second half, wasn't going to get a ton of turnovers. Penn State would maybe get about one a game was the average, which is still real good. A lot of teams would kill for that sort of thing, but it wasn't the same punch you in the mouth style of defense that people got used to under Manny Diaz. Big flash plays. Tom Allen was about the war of attrition. I think there's things Jim Knowles is going to be able to do with Penn State's personnel that are just going to create a lot of problems for offensive lines to deal with, and as a result, makes the life of a quarterback very, very difficult.
People have talked about or alluded to Knowles coming home. They've talked about, a potential relationship with Day. Like how much of this had to do with, you think, external factors, and how much had to do with Penn State, like you just said, ponying up and saying like, dude, you ain't going to turn down this offer. Like, we're here to play big boy football. And if we can be fair, Penn State has the perception of like a really, really great program that is just below Ohio State. Like, that's just what it is. And to be fair, just about every other team in the country falls under that category too. Like that's not a shot at Penn State. So I don't want Penn State fans to get mad at that. If they do, you can hit the comments and let me know how much of an idiot I am. But everybody else is behind Ohio State too, right? Like there's very few programs that you would say like, oh yeah, Ohio State's a little bro there. So but like, how do you kind of calibrate all that? What is your take on all that?
I think that it's complicated. Reading a lot of stuff out there, there was the information that came from Jim Knowles' fiance, so you kind of take that with a grain of salt. But saying that basically Knowles, after in the lead up to the national title game, had made it clear he was going to, entertain some offers elsewhere. And I guess Ohio State didn't take that very well, in that he was banned from the championship celebration after they had won the national title. And I think that really bothered him, and that he wanted to be there with his players and the rest of the team because they'd earned it, obviously. The rumor out there that Ohio State offered him $2.75 million, and then Oklahoma and Notre Dame had both offered him $3 million. Al Golden, obviously, off to the Cincinnati Bengals, and Brent Venables trying to shore up some problems there in Norman, Oklahoma. It made a lot of sense. So it looked like Oklahoma was where he was headed. And then Penn State swoops in at what felt like the 11th hour, offered 3.1. And it just kind of fit. I think it just made a lot of sense. I think the situation with Ohio State probably left a bad taste in his mouth. But now it sets up Jim Knowles for a really interesting 2025 for a lot of reasons. One, you could possibly win a national championship as a defensive coordinator at two different schools in back-to-back seasons within the same freaking conference. Incredible. On top of that, you will definitely play Ohio State next year. So that element of revenge can be on your mind. And also, if legacy is important to him, if you do capture a national championship in this capacity and you do it with this level of flexibility and a roster where Penn State defensively, to all the points I just mentioned, is going to have some answers that they need to figure out, how do you not look at Jim Knowles as maybe one of the best defensive coordinators ever in the history of the game? That job alone would be incredible. So I think he's got plenty of motivation, and $3.1 million really helps. That's really helpful.
I would take that Seminoles football down and put an orange and blue one up there if somebody paid me $3 million to do it. I might even be a little cheaper than that. So I don't think anybody's going to do it. So rest easy. But Tom, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work, bud?
Yeah, check out State of State, a Penn State football show, wherever you get your podcasts. Myself and former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King. And check out Believe in Big Ten, part of the Believe Podcast Network, with myself and former Indiana wide receiver Rhett Lewis, who represents the Big Ten Network and the NFL Network. Again, that's wherever you get your podcasts. And you can check me out on X and Instagram at Tom Hannifan, TomHannifan.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, DJ.